Welcome to Spread Love in Organizations, the healthcare leadership podcast where we explore leadership with purpose. This episode is in partnership with the Termeer Foundation, a nonprofit organization working to vibrantly connect and empower the world of healthcare innovators until every patient has a cure. I'm Naji, your host, joined today by Charlene Rigby, Chief Executive Officer of Global Genes. Charlene has spent her career building organizations at the intersection of data, technology, and life sciences. She led the merger between Global Genes and RareX, a health technology nonprofit. She was previously Chief Business Officer at Fabric Genomics and held executive roles at enterprise software and genomics companies, including Oracle and Double Twist. She started her career in neuroscience research at Roche. When Charlene's daughter was diagnosed with a rare genetic disease, she co-founded the STX-BP1 Foundation. She is committed to finding a cure for her daughter's disorder. Charlene's unplanned connection between her personal life and profession has helped push toward the search for a cure for her daughter and kids like her, and given her work deeper meaning. Charlene is a Termeer scholar. She holds a BA in human biology from Stanford University and an MBA from the Haas School of Business at UC Berkeley. Charlene, it's really a pleasure and honor to have you with me today.
Thanks so much for having me, Naji.
I'd love first to hear more about your personal story and how it links with the really important and impactful work you are doing today.
Yeah. So I am a parent of a now 11-year-old who has a rare neurodevelopmental disorder called STX-BP1. And my daughter was born in 2013, and a few months after she was born, she started experiencing delays. And we kept hoping that these were just temporary and she was going to norm, but it became pretty obvious after she was 6 or 7 months old that she was not moving toward kind of typical development. And so we pushed really hard with her pediatrician, and we were able to get to a geneticist at University of California, San Francisco. So we live in San Francisco, and that started for us a 3-year journey to try to find out what was going on with my daughter. So we went through, something like 27 different tests. We were finally approved for genomic sequencing, whole exome sequencing, and that gave us an answer that she had a mutation in this gene that was involved in communication between neurons. So it was a really difficult answer. And I think that no parent or patient wants to get this type of answer. And at the same time, it was very, very an important piece of information because it gave us a door. It gave us a key to, what we could possibly do next for my daughter. And so we were given a couple of scientific papers by the geneticist and a printout of a Facebook group. And after a few months, I finally got the courage to join the Facebook group. And we found 5 other families and started a foundation for STX-BP1. Really, our goal was to accelerate research and kickstart therapies. We were really quite lucky because even though it was a very, very small disorder, so at the time there were 200 kids who had been diagnosed, there was a lot of basic and translational research that had defined what STX-BP1 did in the body. And so we were able to really leverage that and start to build the strategy around how we would accelerate therapies. And so that's how I got into the rare disease space, not as a technologist, but as a patient and a caregiver.
Well, thank you so much for sharing this story. So from that moment to now working as a CEO at Global Genes, can you tell us a little bit more about your work and where this stands currently?
Yeah. I got very, very passionate about this idea around how we can accelerate work across rare diseases when we were working on my daughter's disorder. So we started with very little, frankly, in terms of the pieces that were needed to start to develop therapies and accelerate therapies. And so we started to develop things like data assets, and I was realizing that those are things that you really could create a much more leverageable infrastructure for to work across rare diseases. And since my background is in data analytics and in the basically generating insights out of data, it was very natural for me to focus on that part of the problem. And so I ended up leaving industry and moving over to a nonprofit called RareX that was building a cross disorder research program to collect data across rare diseases and do it in a way that enabled patients to really be the drivers of that research. So we partner very closely with patient advocacy organizations to do that in that data collection. And then a year and a half after I joined that organization, we merged it, as you said in the introduction, we merged RareX with a larger organization called Global Genes. Global Genes has been in the nonprofit space for over 16 years, focused on enabling and empowering rare disease patients and advocates. And so with bringing together those two organizations, we now have services and offerings around support, education, as well as research.
Well, this is really crucial, especially in this space, obviously, where there's less resources. So it's really meaningful for all the patients. I also work within the rare disease space. I'd love to get your thoughts about really the biggest challenges for rare diseases currently, as you think from a research standpoint and discovering new medicine. Like there is this really big technologies that we're seeing with genes editing, gene therapy, cell therapy, etc., that can help. So there is the hope and there are the challenges being faced with those rare diseases. So I'd love to hear your thoughts as you've been heavily involved and advocating for patients.
Yeah, as you said, this is a really exciting time. Yeah, as hard as the path in rare disease is, it's also a really promising time. All of these genetic therapies, these therapies that have the potential to be disease modifying, precision therapies, even these approaches that are much more scalable around repurposed drugs, like identifying promising repurposed drugs that has the potential to really change the rare disease landscape. The challenge, a major challenge that I see is that for a lot of rare diseases, the drive to develop therapies for that specific rare disease really comes from the patients, and there are very few patients. And so we have this kind of, if you will, financial gap where there are a number of companies that are making medicines for rare disease and have committed, that they have an emphasis on rare disease or an emphasis for part of their portfolio on rare disease. But right now, because of the cost to develop those medicines, to get them all the way through an approval process out onto the market, there's a real challenge in terms of making that economic argument, especially early in the process, where that disorder might not have a lot of kind of the fundamental research that needs to happen in order to, if you will, call it de-risked. So what we see, and frankly, part of the reason why we merged Global Genes and RareX is because we see this, I'll say, frankly, really exciting phenomenon of what we're calling the next generation advocate. And it's patients who are taking it upon themselves to kickstart research, in their disease. And I'll say that, we have done this in my daughter's disorder in terms of doing this kickstarting, but I'll also say that, we, in our founding board, that we had a couple of people, myself and another person who had, some biology background. When I was, of course, when I was studying genetics in 19 Forgotten, as my father says, we were still talking about Mendel and peas. It was very, very different from today. But, a lot of patients don't have a biology background. They might not have a business background. They're coming from whatever background they came from, and yet they have such urgency around needing to have, something that is going to truly be impactful for, them, for their, family member, for their community. And it's that passion and activation that is really kickstarting, therapeutic development in so many of these rare diseases. So it is a huge challenge because there is a knowledge gap that that advocates are working as hard as possible to try to address, and also to build that ecosystem of partners in terms of folks who do understand those processes or who have brought drugs to market, and need to be part of that ecosystem to make that ultimately successful.
So I love how you framed it, next generation advocates, you said. Mm-hmm. So can you tell us a little bit more, or if you have an example where you had this impact and ultimately the research gets started, as you said, and the spark of research gets started?
Yeah. I'm going to use a very old example, and then I can talk about a newer one, because one of I read Breath from Salt a year or so ago, and I was just so struck because it was hard to believe that the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation started, 90 years before they had an approved therapy. And the commitment of that community and those families, and the amount of money that they raised, the researchers that they got involved, the literal creation of an industry around cystic fibrosis was just truly impressive. And so I think that that's a success story, but it's also a 90-year success story. And so if we fast forward to where we are today with all of these new therapeutic approaches and our much clearer understanding of the genetic underpinnings of many of these diseases, because 80% of rare diseases do have a genetic cause. So we now have the ability to kind of shrink this problem, right? And I'll just give another example in the neurodevelopmental disorder space, which is the type of disorder that my daughter has. If you look at Angelman syndrome, so that's a disease that where advocates have really come in and really driven the development of therapeutic pipelines, and even have started biotech companies to drive forward the development of therapies. And one of those therapies is currently in clinical trials for an ASO, for an antisense oligonucleotide therapy. And what I think about today is, Angelman also has been, the first case reports I think were in the mid 1960s. And so what I see that is happening now is this timeline is being shrunk. Like, we have diseases where the first patient reports were, 5 years ago, and already there are therapies that are, being developed. They're oftentimes in academic settings, and now, the N of one or N of few is a possibility is a possible kind of modality for, or strategy for, some of these diseases, but it really is a changing time.
As you look forward for the next years, and you talked about how time is getting luckily shorter, mm-hmm. And the involvement of patients, as you said. I interviewed a prior patient also with a rare disease who's a scientist actually and built his own biotech company, exactly as you shared, to figure out a solution to his disease, and he advanced through IND, and so it's really those great stories. So looking forward, with all the technologies also being developed within the genetic world, what are you most excited about?
There are so many things. I think that this is probably going to be an answer that right now isn't in favor from a market standpoint, but I am really excited about platform approaches, because the issue around economics right now is that we still have pretty bespoke processes, to get a therapy from, in discovery all the way through the regulatory process. And so I think that in order to really unlock the potential around the ultra rare, the very rare, and the ultra rare, and the vanishingly rare diseases, we need to have platform approaches that we can apply, and so there's technology in terms of those approaches, but then there's also a piece of it that is regulatory, and I do think that there's a recognition that needs to happen, and also some efforts, including like the BGTC, that is a joint effort, a public-private partnership that includes the NIH and the FDA, to really build some of those critical pieces around the regulatory.
So I would love now to give you a word and get your reaction.
Okay.
Whatever first come to mind. So the first one is leadership.
I am hesitating because we're actually, I'll give you an answer, but I wanted to insert that Global Genes has started a leadership virtual series this year called the
I love it.
Change. Yeah, and we just had our second installation yesterday, and so the one of the speakers showed a word cloud around feelings around leadership, and so the word that I'm going to use is not one that was on the word cloud. I'm going to say standing tall, not one word, but two words.
I want to hear more about this and the cloud.
So standing tall, the reason that I thought about that is that one of the things that I think is important about leadership is to really know what you're grounded in and be able to stand tall, take a stance, on what you think is important. That is, I think, a core aspect of leadership.
So the second word is rare diseases.
Hope.
The third one is Termeer Foundation.
Impressive and amazing are, I can't pick between the two.
The last one is spread love in organizations.
Inspiring.
Any final word of wisdom, Charlene, for leaders around the world?
I know that right now there's a lot of change happening and in the environment, but I think that really focusing on what matters and standing tall in that is really important in these times.
This is such an important charge for all of us as we move forward in healthcare leaders, whether we're in drug development, biotech, pharma, nonprofit, patient advocacy. It's really an important point you're making, and I thank you so much for being with me today and for the impactful work you're doing for several patients around the world. And I'm as hopeful as you that we will advance therapies to help patients like your daughter and cure those diseases at some point. Thanks again for being with me today, Charlene.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to the show. More episodes in partnership with the Rarity Foundation can be found on spreadloveio.com. Make sure to subscribe. Let's inspire change together and make a positive impact in healthcare, one story at a time.